Welcome, folks, to the latest edition of the Coaches Connect call. I'm Coach Jeremy, and we have a excellent uh, roundtable of coaches here who have come to share their coaching wisdom, to seek some guidance from their fellow coaches, and to help us answer the big questions. And for today, we are starting with Coach Hannah. And Coach Hannah was just briefing us on a client situation that they are running into and would like some feedback from the coaches here. So, Hannah, I'll toss to you, and you can give us, again, just a little brief reframe of the situation that you find with your client.
Yeah, so I was just kind of mentioning, I've been working with her. I believe she's 56 now. She's been really athletic her whole life. She's been really good nutritionally, and she just came to me to kind of get a more dynamic view of nutrition, I guess, just to kind of broaden her spectrum. And she did mention to me that the last 2 weeks she's been having a lot of like spiking and then dropping in her blood glucose levels, and she can't really figure out why. And I understand that I am not a medical doctor, like that's not within my
Mhm.
scope of practice. But I was just kind of asking her general questions, like if she swapped anything in her diet, if maybe she increased her exercise, or if she maybe added a supplement that I didn't know about, just trying to kind of gauge or tiptoe around it a little bit within my
Mhm.
scope of practice. We did both agree that she should talk to her healthcare professional just because it is such a drastic up and down. But I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced something like this or what they would do differently, that kind of situation.
Uh, One kind of clarifying question to just get us started would be how is she measuring her blood glucose levels? Does she have like a CGM? Is this kind of more subjective measures? What are we looking at?
So she has one of the monitors in the back of her arm that she
Mhm.
got from her healthcare professional. I cannot recall its exact make or model at this time. I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is a blood tracker in her arm, and it's connected to an app that tracks hourly her blood glucose levels.
Gotcha. Cool. So yeah, so blanket term for those devices, normally continuous glucose monitor or CGM. They are often used by diabetics or people with prediabetes, or as someone, it sounds like your person is kind of in the space of what we'd refer to as someone who has blood glucose tolerance issues or management issues. From what I understand, they are not pre-diabetic currently, or they do not have diabetes.
No, so she's not pre-diabetic and she does not have diabetes. She was, I believe, 6.5 years ago on like the
Mhm.
bridge of being pre-diabetic, and I think this
Okay.
that was the time when she started tracking it, and she
Mhm.
just kind of kept tracking it from there. I'm slowly trying to encourage her, since her obviously until this happened, like she doesn't really need to be tracking this closely. Like I said, she's not
Right.
pre-diabetic and she's not diabetic. Like just kind of try and figure out mentally why she's still tracking it so closely. But then when she started noticing the spikes and the drops, it just kind of reinforced why she wants to keep tracking it. So
Mm.
I'm kind of at a loss because again, this is not really in my scope of practice, but she keeps like seeing where I would stand on it, whereas I keep telling her like, talk to your doctor, get until you know a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a conversation that a lot more people are getting. Coaches will face this conversation more frequently. People are more, one, have greater access to tools that previously were not available to them. So they'll have greater levels of insight. Like on the smallest, easiest access point here, we're seeing proliferation things like smart wearable technology. People have smart scales. And then, yeah, on the kind of a little bit more invasive side of things, we're seeing CGMs that are used in non-diabetic populations. What I can say from that standpoint is in the medical professionals that I follow, so just from that part of the conversation, most obesity specialists and people who deal with people who have uh, abnormal blood glucose levels have said that it's like it's not super relevant for people without those issues to wear a CGM. It's like the things that it predicts and shows are quite normal excursions of blood glucose levels. But that being said, like if a client is expressing interest in those things, is it worthwhile to to kind of champion them and say, hey, like this is part of your own experimentation. You're learning some things here. There may be some value there. On the flip side, in what it sounds like you're potentially concerned about with your client, is overemphasizing those normal excursions. So we eat something potentially with a higher carb load, you see blood glucose go up and then come back down, or you just see it dropping after a period of fasting or a period of activity. If it's responding in kind of predictable ways, are they overemphasizing kind of those spikes and dips? Are they making those into something where it's like, this is actually not a clinical concern? It's just that they don't have the experience to to monitor those things. You, as a nutrition coach, probably don't have it within your scope to also say, hey, yeah, this is within normal ranges, unless you come to the table with something like an additional medical degree to lean on in those conversations. So your instinct to say, "Hey, speak with your medical provider, get their input on these," is probably the right way to direct that conversation. Uh, Additional to that, I would say, coaches, do you have anything else that you would add to this conversation to help Hannah to improve that conversation with their client, or to help guide their client's use of the CGM? Jason, you have something you want to add?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, Jeremy. Um, if I'm looking at the camera a little weird, I had retinal detachment surgery about a month ago, so I can't really see very well out of my right eye. So I wear a patch usually until it heals and all that stuff. But I don't. I'm just finishing chapter 12, or just finished chapter 12 in level one. But from my experience, just in life and sports and stuff, I've always tried to keep track of the glycemic index of carbohydrates. So I know you had mentioned the carbohydrates carbohydrate intake. I was curious, does she have or is she able to discuss? I'm sure she's able to discuss what type of carbohydrates what she's taking in, as far as that goes, to see whether or not whether it's a higher glycemic carb is causing that blood sugar spike, or it could be like a food combining type of situation where she could just be eating straight carbohydrates versus putting a protein or fat in combination with the carbohydrate. That might help, but again, I don't know. I'm new to um, this, so that's just like the initial thoughts I had when she had mentioned that. Does it make sense? Hello?
Yep. So got you loud and clear. So it sounds like Hannah agrees that those are things that are worth experimenting with, and things that that your client is potentially either interested in tracking or currently tracking, kind of like a food diary to better understand how how those changes in blood glucose are being impacted.
I'm so sorry. I was typing out a response to the in chat question. I'm so sorry. Do you mind asking me that again?
Yeah. So Jason, just back to you. If you could summarize your comment or your question.
Yeah, I was just curious. Do you have a good handle on what type of carbohydrates she's taking in when she gets these blood sugar spikes? So if she's taking in higher glycemic carbohydrates, sometimes you'll get
Mhm.
that glucose spike, and or if it could be like a food combination thing. If she's just eating just straight carbohydrates during a meal or like a snack without combining it with a protein or maybe a fat. That would bring down any glycemic index of a carbohydrate, and that would help kind of even out her blood sugar. So I was just curious if you have any idea on that, or have you discussed that with her?
Yeah, so she is keeping a food diary, just kind of tracking basically what the textbook tells us to do. Like, she's not tracking essentially the amounts other than her hand size portions, but she's
Hmm.
tracking what kinds and how they're making her feel, just to kind of help her identify. what she likes, what she doesn't like, what makes her feel wonky and what doesn't. And from what I can understand based off of the food journal, there isn't a weird change. She didn't add anything new, she didn't subtract anything. She is pretty good about making a well balanced meal, so it's not just carbohydrates. It is like the protein and the fiber, the complex fiber in there, and the carbohydrates. So that's why I'm just a little stumped here. Like there's nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
mean, in addition to kind of food journaling in terms of the types of foods and references to hand portions, so some sort of measurement, another experiment you may want to have her try is, as Jason kind of pointed out, food combining and changing the order of some foods that how she consumes them. So aiming for kind of like more protein and fibrous foods first, and then simple carbs later on. If blood glucose kind of is behaving in erratic ways, that might be a way to start to see a more stable pattern. Uh, is that super useful? Again, I think it depends on really, it's like, has her medical team flagged this is something that valuable? Uh, and is this adding another layer of kind of food rules that may not be that valuable? A lot of, I think, guidance here for this conversation for your client is going to come from what you initially started with. Speak to your physician and then implement changes based on what they share. Uh, there is kind of a trend of people getting access to more data is seen as largely positive. People's inability to interpret that data correctly can have some negative side effects. We don't really know for at this point yet in terms of, is the information that your client getting, is it valuable, is it actionable, and is it clinically relevant? But the clinically relevant part, her medical team can help guide that question. Is it actionable? That's something that you guys get to decide, but it comes in that specific order. Uh, yeah, it's certainly a tricky conversation to have, I will say. We don't want to downplay a client or like send them a whole bunch of information and be like, see, this is why monitoring this is useless and not appropriate for you, and to try and disempower them, but also letting them know, hey, here's how I can let you, or here's how I can help you guide that path. But there is a certain order of operations that we need to have here. You also mentioned that it's like their physician did give them the CGM. Do you have any insight into what that conversation was like? Where they're like, "Hey, you have to use this for a certain amount of time," or was it, "Sure, go ahead, I can order it for you and bill you for it," but what does it look like?
From my understanding, like I said, she was pre-diabetic probably over 6 or 7 years ago now. So in
Mhm.
terms of her relaying the information to me in her words is very fuzzy as of right now, just because it
Gotcha.
was so long ago. But from my understanding, she was at a point where she was almost pre-diabetic. The CGM was ordered, just to kind of track it to see if the levels would go down. But there was not a discussion about how long that was going to be tracked, at least to her knowledge and therefore mine.
Mhm.
There was not a longevity conversation track. That was actually something I approached. Like, is that something she potentially wanted to discuss with her doctor if she wanted to potentially not track this for very long? And she was just kind of the opinion that she'll do whatever her doctor tells her to do. And so I just kind of reiterated that whatever she was comfortable talking to me about, especially with her medical provider,
Mhm.
going to be where my scope of practice kind of there and ended because I can't obviously tell her to stop using one or to use one because that's not within my
Right.
realm of expertise.
Mhm.
So I just kind of again pushed that, or I guess encouraged her to, if she was really nervous about this, to talk to her doctor about it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I mean that's a great starting point. And I think getting a little bit more in terms of like consensus from other coaches who've had that experience is definitely a good instinct to follow up with. Anna, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, this time it's not what you were going to say, probably. um, yeah, years ago I had some really big ups and downs. This was like 20 years ago, more than that. Anyway, some big ups and downs in blood sugar, and it turned out that I had yeast illness or candida, whatever. And so I saw a specialist, and he put me on a really strict diet for a while. And I took some supplements and some medication. So I would also maybe, if it seems kind of a mystery and the doctors are just like, well, let's just throw some medication at it, I would probably look to somebody who specializes in that and see if that might be the root cause. Because we can, well, anyway, I know I learned from a really famous doctor about that, and it's pretty fascinating. And it has to do with gut health and the integrity of the small intestine and how yeast organisms off-gas ammonia as they die. And so, even as you're becoming, like, even if you have a client who's becoming really feels very ill and sort of skin crawling uncomfortability, if they're cutting out carbs, and particularly if they do it rapidly, that can be a cause. Not that we would ever diagnose that, but it's just something that I would suggest, maybe it would be worth looking into, talking with somebody who has expertise in that.
What would be the specialty of that medical physician, and what titles would they typically use?
The person I saw was an MD, acupuncturist, homo homeopath. So I think he's pretty rare bird. And I would say, I think there are specific doctors who still specialize in that, maybe a holistic nutritionist or, yeah, probably a preventative medicine doctor.
Yeah, other medical professionals that I would also suggest would be gastroenterologist would probably be someone to speak with here. Endocrinologist would probably be a specialty here that's interested in this field as well as obesity doctor. So if she has further follow-up, it's been 6 years, it's probably worth having a follow-up conversation. I would also be curious to know what is the lifetime effectiveness of this device. If this is the same device from 6 years ago, is it still calibrated in a way that's useful? It might be all roads kind of lead back to a medical professional here, having the discussion about, are these clinically relevant? Is this tool that I'm using actually still calibrated appropriately? Getting that information there and then getting further guidance from their medical professional. Your job is then to help them implement the plan, or to implement further kind of data gathering to guide that process. That's where you can likely be the most useful as an in between her and her primary care physician, whichever specialist she decides to go to.
Cool. Thank you so much for answering all my questions.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, it sounds like you were on the right path anyway. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of affirmation that it's like, cool, just continue to have the conversation that you are, uh, and really put the onus on them to kind of take those next steps, but with a guidance in terms of the entire sea of medical professionals. Here's likely where you can start to narrow your focus a little bit. And even if it's just her GP to start with, they'll also be able to give her really good guidance in terms of referrals within their network.
Sweet. Thank you. I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Awesome. Thank you for getting us started. Uh, any additional questions or comments for Hannah before we move on? Cool. If not, then let's go into our one of our other posted case studies for today. I will pull this one up and I'll share my screen shortly. So if you look in the chat box, or if you just jumped in, you may not have seen this one already. So I'll share it again. Cool. So this one, just to give you a brief overview, is from Coach Kelly O'Doherty Miller, and they are using themselves as a personal example here, but they're on a weight loss journey, cutting calories, so they have reduced energy intake, and they're getting fatigue that they would expect that comes along from having reduced intake, metabolism trying to correct for reduced energy intake, feeling a little bit sluggish and less excited to move. which are things that we normally expect to see. They tend to struggle knowing what to do when it comes to physical exercise when this happens. So maybe the list of things that they would normally gravitate towards becomes less appealing, or it gets smaller and less accessible. So naturally, their body wants to kind of send them into a rest mode to slow down, but mentally, they want to see if they can push through a little bit and get in the same kind of level of movement that they would if they weren't in a dieting or energy restricted state, because they feel like it will benefit them to push through and fight kind of some of that metabolic adaptation. And then their question is there a downside or anything negative I should be aware of when I'm choosing to push through versus listening to the adaptation that my body is insisting on? Uh, they don't have a lot of experience in this coaching space, but maybe someone here does. So, coaches, I'm tossing this one to you. Uh, in a dieting phase or in an energy reduced state, how do you guide your clients or yourself through making movement choices?
Is it okay to talk about supplements?
I don't think that's probably the most pertinent to this discussion just yet, but we can put a pin in supplementation for this one for a second.
Thank you.
Daniel, your hand's up.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and I think there are a lot of things to consider. So this is how I would think about it, and that is to probably create some movement standards. So, for example, for exercise, for steps or activity during the day.
Mhm.
So some intentional activity that could be walking, that could be whatever. And monitor that. As far as I know, what usually happens through the adaptation as we, for example, are in an energy deficit is that our spontaneous activity, so non-exercise activity, trends down. So this
Correct.
could be something that is that I would consider, and this is what I usually see. However, and there are seems to be people who are genetically more compensators, so they reduce calories just a little and they suddenly stop moving a lot. And this happens to some of my clients. So just 200 calories lower and they would sit on their ass whole day. But there are people like me who pretty much I eat, let's say, a banana more and I run 10 kilometers and more, you know. So on the other exact opposite spectrum. So there is definitely this natural tendency, and that's why I think feeling alone can be kind of misleading, and especially for people who have trouble losing weight, that they can feel like I I don't want to feel that much or naturally have the tendency to not move that much, but there's like overcompensation on their body. And that's considering that the energy deficit is not really high.
Excellent answer. So a lot of really good points there in terms of using step count as a proxy towards overall energy expenditure, understanding that a natural adaptation to being energy restricted or to dieting uh, is to see a reduction in overall activity, primarily from NEAT, which is what you were referring to there. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, I believe, is like the full term. So yes, that is something that we would expect to see. So if they have a step count from their pre-dieting, or they have maybe passive tracking on a smart device that they have, like their phone or a smartwatch, they may be able to see uh, what do my activities levels look like via step count when I'm not dieting, and just try and kind of maintain that trend. So as opposed to pushing it higher while dieting. So excellent advice there. Uh, Also understanding that some folks, yeah, a small deficit can still have large implications from a psychological standpoint for them. Some people feel hunger more acutely, and as a result, they're just less likely to want to move. Other folks don't really notice that differentiation that much, and they just keep trucking as usual. So a lot of really valuable points there. Starting with a metric that they can kind of passively track and just trying to maintain that might be a great way to continue to avoid some of the adaptation that they would expect. Hannah, I think you had your hand up first, and then we'll go Anna from there.
Oh, I don't actually know how to raise my hand, but thank you. Yeah, I was just curious maybe what like her recovery regimen is. Maybe she's not sleeping enough, or maybe she's not doing some kind of preemptive things to maybe loosen the muscles that she's working out. Because if her issue is with motivation and not feeling like she wants to exercise, maybe she doesn't have the energy to do it because she's not recovering properly. So I would just be curious what she's doing recovery wise.
Yeah, that certainly valuable questions and insight if you're going from the perspective of coach to client, asking those questions to try and get greater insight in terms of, are you adequately recovering? Let's make sure we're taking care of some of those periphery things first, as well as are you uh, are you kind of priming your body for movement? So if the idea of getting into like a full uh, CrossFit style workout is just like my brain cannot even comprehend that right now, maybe I just need to convince myself, let's start with the warm up, see what my body can tolerate from there, and then hey, maybe this might be a full on high intensity session, or I can make adjustments based on the feedback that I get from the warm up. So yeah, both really good questions and insights together, as well as practical strategies to apply. And then Anna.
Thank you. I also love the comments from the first person too, and I forgot to do my little clappy thing, so it's just a miss there. Well, this is something that for myself, I do, I really like one supplement in particular, but for many, many years, what I've done is I've trained myself to be ambivalent to whether or not I want to go work out. So I just don't ask. I just say it's on the calendar, I'm going, I'm getting dressed, and I don't consult myself about it at all, which is a little bit cold, but it works, and I've just been able to maintain consistency even when I have COVID or something. I'm like, this is what I do, and I will, like you said, I will diminish it. So if I really feel I don't have strength after I've warmed up, and I'm not feeling that powered surge or feeling fueled, I will go with body weight, or I might work on more releases. I might emphasize that or change the ratio of what kind of work I do, but I don't skip it. And I think it's like cutting class. When I was in college, I realized if I cut class, I'm a class cutter, and so I just don't do it.
Well, I mean, every now and then you might miss one or two classes. I mean, having class at 8:30 in the morning just was unreasonable. Uh, but yeah, I think there's again value there in terms of having the appointment set, scheduling it, and then being able to modify based on the feedback given. So one of the points of Kelly's poster that my brain zooms in on is choosing to push through versus listening to my body. I think there's probably, again, like many things that we encounter as coaches, there's a spectrum here. So choosing to push through could be just as Hannah and both Anna mentioned, keeping that commitment, making sure that it's like something happens. Listening to your body, I think, is still quite valuable. So not, as both all coaches here have said, not completely like disregarding your body and just listening to whatever the app tells you to do or whatever's written on the piece of paper. It's like I got to go for my 1 RM because it's on the piece of paper. It's like maybe not the thing that we should follow during an energy restricted phase. Uh, but having some form of movement where you have a minimum standard, like Daniel mentioned, you have the ability to listen to your body and then make informed choices is probably the place we'd play. And part of Kelly's question is like, is there a negative or a downside? I think it really depends on, as Daniel pointed out, like what is the level of restriction that we're experiencing here? And then, as Hannah pointed out as well, what is kind of like the level of activity that they're striving for as and recovery what level of recovery can their current intake support. So high restriction, low recovery capacity, high workout load, probably looking at more overuse injuries, potentially skill related injuries as well if they're playing in like a competitive field during that time as well. Uh, Moderate to low energy restriction, pretty decent recovery capacity, might not actually require much modification to the current program at all. But on a, I don't know if you were, if there were supplements that you want to offer here, but having an extra coffee might be the difference between sticking to the workout and getting it done in that slightly energy restricted phase versus taking the day off. So there is definitely room for a little bit of supplementation, a little bit of more strategic strategizing from scheduling as well as overall program design. Risk reward here really depends on magnitude of how intense and prolonged is a workout or movement session, and then how large and prolonged is the period of energy restriction. So some things to consider. Dana.
Hi, sorry, I'm not feeling 100%, so I'm going to keep my video off. But I
Yeah,
mean,
no
another
worries.
thing that just sort of came to me was sort of like, I mean, just being self-aware enough to just know whether it's a pattern that this person is, like, is it a pattern that they just, are something happens, something's going on in their life, or like, oh, I just don't feel like working out, or is it really like
Mhm.
listening to your body and, like really kind of tuning in and being like, what does my body actually need in this moment? Can I go and do a walk, or, I think, maybe kind of asking those kind of questions, like, is this a pattern that I'm repeating? Because I think one day or a couple of days, not working out is okay. But if you find that one day turns into two, turns into three, turns into four, then that's something else to kind of look at.
Yeah, so it certainly becomes more valuable depending on what the coaching relationship is. So in this example, it is the coach coaching themselves. If we were to put ourselves in the shoes of a coach working with Kelly or working with another client who is similar there, I think we gain more insight into how to handle that conversation based on historical context of working that client. So if you've worked with them for a few weeks or a few months, uh, you probably have more insight into what are their movement patterns, how do they normally respond to other challenges, not just energy restriction. And in that case, you may actually offer them alternative ways of communicating here, including just letting them know this is not that serious. You should do something, get off your butt and go train. And there are some people who pay a coach specifically for that service, for them to tell them it's like, hey, I just needed a little bit of a swift nudge in the butt to go get it done. So that is something that is appropriate. Again, having that context for the person. So in this case, Kelly, what do you know of yourself and your typical movement patterns? Are you normally like really excited to move and you've noticed a downturn more recently? If that's the case, uh, then yeah, taking a period to monitor this, monitoring overall restriction, how great is the deficit you're creating? You may want to change some things from the plan going forward. Uh, if this is a coach monitoring their client, then yeah, leaning quite heavily on historical norms. What are their tendencies towards movement? Do they typically enjoy it and now they don't? Or is it someone who's like, it's always been a little bit of a squeaky wheel to get them to get their workouts done? Uh, and part of your role is gentle encouragement there. So definitely worth pointing out. Anna, I'll give you the last word on this one.
Oh, thanks. One of the things I bookend the not asking myself, whether or not I feel like working out is at the end of the workout, I also don't say, oh, that was a really great workout, or, oh, that was really not the greatest workout. So I don't worry about it. I don't have to qualify it. I just move on and I go for the next day. I mean, once in a while I find myself going like, wow, that felt really good. But that's about all the attention I give that. And that way it's not that helps me keep up my consistency because I'm not taking myself on this kind of roller coaster ride in a way, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then I supplement with a plant amino that has chlorella and spirulina, and I am noticeably and notably stronger and have greater stamina. It's just kind of incredible. I love it, and it sells out, so don't everyone buy it. And, and I think I had one more thing I wanted to say, what we were talking about, which is, the self-awareness and the self-care. Oh, I rely on this app. So it's called Welltory. I don't think you can see it anyway. My watch tells me how stressed I am, where my nervous system is registering. And so I've been taking measurements before and after exercise to see if the effort that I'm considering a match for my energy is reasonable for my nervous system. So that was to answer my interest in the downside of overdoing or pushing through.
Fair enough. Yeah. They're so kind of related, semi-related to kind of Hannah's initial discussion in terms of devices and getting reliable output from them. I've often seen coaches who wear some sort of wearable technology that gives you, here's your rest and recovery for the day, here's what your overall strain load is like. Uh, I think these things are getting better, but I do still think there is often points where coaches or clients note that it's like, I actually feel fine and ready to train, but my watch is telling me that I shouldn't, so I'm just going to take a rest day, I guess, today. And it kind of conflicts with that with internal monitoring or some objective feedback that you can get, or sorry, I should say subjective feedback that you can get from the person. So all of those things, I think you get better insight as you practice longer. You have more of a history to pull from, and then you can make that final choice. And helping clients to understand their own history, interpret that information, and put it into like a useful pattern so they can apply it is all part of our coaching job as well. I think tools will continue to get better. They will continue to proliferate more. Our job is to kind of check in with them, see what the research is saying, experiment with them to our own ability. So I'm not saying everyone here should get a CGM, but be aware kind of what the overall conversation is, especially taken from more relevant researchers or clinicians in the field, and then use that to help inform the conversations we have. Sandy, I see. Oh, is Sandy still here? I think they may have bounced out, but I just saw their question here. If you reappear, Sandy, we will have this conversation regarding SSR and marketing. But for the time being, let's go on to our second case study. So I'm just going to share my screen here quick. So also share the link here. So this one is from Coach Courtney Evers, and they are looking for some guidance on helping their brother decide between creatine, specifically creatine HCl, I believe that is, versus creatine monohydrate. I think HCl is maybe hydrochloride, I can't remember. In any case, they have someone that they're working with, a family member. They admit right off the bat, maybe not the best fit from a coach client perspective, but we'll allow it for the case study in question, or for the purposes of keeping our case study on track. More important conversation here is there a significant difference between the two? And then how would we handle that conversation? So my question for you coaches would be, what sources would you pull from if you were looking for information on this? And then kind of subsequent to that discussion would be, is this a conversation that you would have with your client? How would you handle it? What is its importance overall? And I'm not sure if your hand is still up from previous or if you had something to add to this one. Nope. Okay, cool. So I'm going to lower your hand there. Hannah, what do you have?
As far as like recommending this, because it's technically on the realm of like supplements, I probably wouldn't
Mhm.
directly recommend anything. But I would probably, just because I don't know that much about creatine or hydrochloric acid, like those
Mhm.
specific products, like I personally don't know very much about it. So I would feel really uncomfortable directly saying like this one's better than that one. I would probably do some more personal research, look up maybe some case studies of regular people that have taken these and also some athletes that have taken these just to kind of get a full
Mhm.
spectrum idea. But also, I mean, you could really try anything. I have seen a couple clients that have tried creatine, adding just a little bit in their pre workout, and I have
Mhm.
seen some pretty positive results. People really like it, they feel really happy on it. So that would probably be my only comment around it, just because I do know that creatine can be very beneficial for the bigger gains, as mentioned in the case study. And if that's something that he wants, like that's his goal is to gain muscle and have hypertrophy, then I would probably be okay adding creatine into his regimen, as long as he was tracking it and things like that. I just don't know if I would directly be like, yeah, let's try it, if that makes sense.
Fair. And I mean, I think kudos to you for being very kind of aware of terminology and where it intersects with your scope as well. So, as a nutrition coach, depending on where you're practicing specifically, telling people about certain foods or certain dietary supplements can be outside your scope of practice. For the purposes of this call, we're going to assume that we're in a very conservative area and that we should not be telling people what to eat or what supplements to take. That may or may not be true for you, depending on where you live, or your other certifications or other credentials to your name. That being said, we have a place to get really useful information for dietary supplements. Normally, my suggestion on this conversation would be starting with examine.com. It's probably the most comprehensive, easily available online repository of all things supplement related and excellent source for anyone interested in sports nutrition, as well as they'll typically give you like a full effects matrix of any relevant uh, benefits attributed to a specific supplement. Creatine probably has the most citations of any supplement that they have there. It'd probably be protein powders, creatine, and omegas as the three things that carry kind of the most of the largest library of information there that you can gain access to quite easily. Uh, from the kind of secondary conversation there, should we kind of shuttle this person towards creatine monohydrate, or should we continue to support them taking creatine HCl? I think that one, it relates to a conversation that we've had last week and potentially the week before, is what is the potential downside that we're trying to avoid here? So is there any risk or harm that is clear or evident by continuing to, maybe not allow is not the right word, but supporting them using that supplementation? Dana.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, I do know a little bit more about creatine. I know that doesn't like change my scope, but I guess my
Mhm.
my initial sort of instinct is like if this brother is doing something and the outcome base is that he actually feels better, um, you know, I unless there is a downside about the about that version. I do know a little bit more about the monohydrate, and
Mhm.
apparently, I mean, there's just so much research on the benefits of it. Again, I know that's not something that is in my scope, but I mean, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think maybe doing some research just to make sure there aren't any downsides of the other kind. But again, as long as he feels like it's helping, you know,
Mhm.
maybe that's, enough of the sort of outcome-based evidence that is necessary for him to continue.
Excellent answer. Yep. In terms of this person is already kind of weighed the pros and cons for themselves. They're feeling better. They have noted some attribute or positive attributes from taking the supplement, it kind of ends the conversation there. It's like, okay, they're aware, they're happy to continue to take the supplement. I could come in over the top and tell them, oh, but actually this thing that you're not taking may save you some money and it has more research towards it. But at the end of the day, it's like, why halt their forward momentum here? They're doing a thing. There's very low risk involved. I haven't personally told them to take the thing, but it doesn't mean that I should tell them to stop. Uh, as a coach here, so actually another thing that I'll add in here in terms of the overall conversation regarding recommending supplementation, what we can do as coaches is share relevant research with someone and then just give them the highlighted version of, here are some resources, here is the TLDR version of them. In terms of if you want to take it, bookend that with the idea of, if you want to take any supplements, consult your physician. So this is not a recommendation or a glowing endorsement on my end. I'm not telling you to take it or how much to take or when to take it. I'm giving you the relevant information. You can then make a decision. If you want to go forward with it, I would encourage you to speak with your physician. That normally covers your butt pretty well from a legal standard. It fulfills your role as a coach as well. So you're still providing a useful service, but you're avoiding being overly prescriptive, which if something were to occur, some negative reaction or some sort of intolerance or some sort of allergy, then you're covered there because you never told them to take it. You never told them how much to take or why to take it. All things to consider when you're working as a solo practitioner, especially in a place that is a little bit more litigious or conservative.
All right. Question just to piggyback. Are we also just sort of ignoring the fact that it's the brother? Because I feel like
For the
for our
case of our
purposes,
case study, yeah. I
okay,
mean, we could open up a side debate here of whether it's valuable to coach your family, and I would say the question is, maybe. I don't know your family.
right.
Would I coach my family? Not anymore is my answer. But I don't know I don't know this person's brother. Therefore, if they want to engage them more, just answer some of their questions. These are the resources that I would say it would be valuable for them to check out, how to handle that conversation. And then from there, I wish them the best. I hope they have a happy Thanksgiving.
Right. Yeah, because it sounds like maybe the brother wanted the advice on the creat, maybe I'm reading that wrong, that like he wanted help on the creatine, but then the last sentence he wrote here is, I think he needs to eat more carbs and up the fat or whatever. And I was like, I don't, is was that help that was, kind of asked for the brother? Or I guess I wasn't sure, if that was just.
Yeah, there seems to be a couple things going on in this one. The primary or the first question is regarding creatine, HCl versus monohydrate.
Right.
There's a secondary kind of paragraph there where it shares a little bit more information, and
Right.
there also note that he has a nutrition protocol from a different seeming nutrition coach. So we're not going to get into that for today.
Yeah.
We'll assume that they're coming to Coach Courtney specifically for the creatine conversation, and then Courtney also shared the rest of the information potentially for our own benefit to see if that sways their decision or the recommendation towards either version of creatine.
Perfect. Thanks.
Cool. We have a few more minutes before we wrap up today. Any final thoughts on our case studies or any final questions before we wrap up? Cool. Then this feels like a good place to leave it for today. Thank you, folks, for your participation, for your questions. And I believe actually our next scheduled call is currently for Wednesday the 16th. That one is actually going to be on pause and will resume the following week. So next week, if you have any questions or conversations or support that you need, find us in the larger PN community, and then we'll be back in action the following week with Coach Kate. All right, gang, take care and have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.